Here we go. Welcome back into a live edition of Bengals Breakdown. I am your host, Stone Shields. Got my right-hand man, Chris Daughtry, helping us out this afternoon, producing today's live show. Certainly very thankful for him. We got plenty to talk about here on today's live edition of Bengals Breakdown. Appreciate all 30 of you that are with us from the beginning here on today's show. Zach Taylor is down in Florida. Obviously, we got some owners' meetings, things like that going on. All the coaches met with local members of their respective medias. Earlier this week, the Cincinnati group, of course, talked with Zach Taylor. He spoke at length with them for, I believe, over an hour at a little breakfast session there down in Florida. Talked about several things. Really, the most noteworthy thing that stood out to me was that he plans on playing his starters a little bit more in the preseason come 2025. So let me know. Do you want the starters to play more in the preseason? Sound off for us in the comment section of today's show. Type Y for yes or N for no. We touched on this in a video earlier this week. I think this is great from Zach Taylor. And quite honestly, I don't think he has much of a choice considering how much his teams have struggled in the month of September. Something's got to change, and I think really the most obvious change you can make is to play your starters a little bit more in the preseason. Of course, Bengals starters only played one series this past preseason against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let me know in the comments. Get your thoughts in there. I'll give some shout-outs here as we get going here on today's live show. You guessed it. Tim Tyra, of course, is here hanging out with us. Tim, appreciate you. He says hooday to Chris as well. Appreciate you, Tim. Dr. B is here. He says hooday. Hooday, Dr. B. He says why. Thanks for stopping by. CWT also here hanging out with us on today's edition of Bengals Breakdown. Got a couple of whys in the comments section. I think for me it's pretty obvious. I definitely get the concern with the injuries, guys getting hurt, things of that nature that really could cause issues for the Cincinnati Bengals. But at the end of the day, it's football, and tackling specifically has been an issue for this defense, and I think that can get quelled a bit if you play some more reps in the preseason. Stick around. We'll be talking about that during one of our segments here on today's live show. Also, we're going to be talking position of need coming up on today's show. What do you think is the Bengals' biggest position of need? Ben Baby dropped his top three for the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming segment as well. Several different answers here, of course. You could go edge rusher. You could go offensive line, guard, right? More specifically, interior offensive line. You could say linebacker. You could say safety. You could say corner. Several answers here. Give me one in the comments of today's show. If you had to pick one that you think is the single biggest need. I understand there's multiple Dr. B's in there cheating a little bit. He says guard or edge. I understand it's tough, and I understand the guard and the edge is both something that significantly needs to improve for Cincinnati, but one position, let me know in the comments of today's show. I'm putting you guys on the spot, so I'll put myself on the spot here as well. I would say guard. And it's tough to pick one of the three or four, really, if they're a linebacker in there, certainly. Guard, I would say, is probably the number one thing. Now, Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin, they've talked about how they make their life on the offensive line difficult because they spread out five guys and they throw the ball all over the field, which makes things hard on the offensive line, especially from a protection standpoint. Only so many protections that you can utilize when you have five wideouts lined up for you. But I think guard protecting Joe Burrow, that is always number one in my book. So I would have to say guard for me. Personally, Tim Tyra says safety because he wants Malachi Starks. Every video that we do seemingly talking about the draft, most of our videos this time of year obviously are talking about the draft. Tim Tyra's in the comment section telling everybody need Malachi Starks. And I think it's a great pick. I've said that name a lot here on today's show. There's a couple of guys that maybe if they slide, I would take over Starks. But I think Starks and Al Golden's defense would be tremendous. We're going to talk plenty of draft here on today's show as well. James also in the comment section. He says guard followed by safety. Also going to be kind of recapping what Cincinnati has done here. We'll talk Trey Hendrickson, his appearance on the Pat McAfee show, of course. Katie Blackburn's comments. To start our first segment. We'll finish off that first segment talking kind of an off-season roundup to this point by Cincinnati. You got a lot of execs that have commented on the Cincinnati Bengals, albeit anonymously, down at those meetings in Florida. We're going to have some quotes from those people as well. But let me know, what do you think the Bengals get in terms of a grade here at this point in the offseason? Keep in mind, you might be frustrated with what they've done or what they haven't done in free agency, but what they did with their star wide receivers, I think, bumps this grade up pretty significantly. Dr. B says C minus. See, I'm a little higher than that because you got T. Higgins back, Jamar Chase back, Mike Gesicki back. I'm kind of factoring that in. If you just do free agency, period, obviously you're looking at probably a D there, but you got to factor in Jamar. You got to factor in T as well. Caleb Norman as a B in the comment section. I think that's appropriate, right? B, you've done some things that, you wish you would have done more of, talking about adding depth in your secondary, adding more guys to your offensive line. You're frustrated by that, but you got your stars back, and I think that's what most of us were asking all this time. Houday number 9 says A because they got those deals done. I think that's something you could say as well. I think A really is the fine answer considering what you were able to get done with T. Higgins and with Jamar Chase. We're going to be talking about that a lot on today's show as well. Also, we will have a mailbag here on today's live edition of Bengals Breakdown. It'll be our third segment here on today's live show. We were figuring out some things. Chris did a great job getting that fixed. That's why we were a couple minutes late here on today's live show. Some issues with the comments pulling, but we got that squared away, so we're ready to rock here with our mailbag. Got plenty of time to get your comments in, get your questions in. Hashtag Bengals or Super Chat. Skip the line altogether and get a part of our mailbag here at Bengals Breakdown. We've had great interaction in the past. Hopefully we can do that again here today. Make sure you get your questions in. I've seen a few of you. I know Tim, before we even went live, had a few in himself, so appreciate that from Tim. Everybody, make sure hashtag Bengals, and we will try to get your questions on our mailbag. Now, if you are ready to start today's live show, give us a like right now. We got about 33 people in here hanging out with us. And you got 16 likes here. Let's try to get to 20 likes here before we move on. Help us out. Hit that thumbs up icon if you haven't done so already. Really makes our life a lot easier. It makes the bosses happy here at Chat Sports and allows us to bring you guys more Bengals content and coverage throughout the offseason. Got to get those like numbers up. Always trying to push those metrics here on Bengals Breakdown. Like certainly a very important one. So we got 20 likes right there. Appreciate everybody that hit that thumbs up icon. And something you should always do for our videos. Show your support for what we're doing here at Bengals Breakdown. We greatly appreciate it. All right, coming up live here on Bengals Breakdown, the latest Bengals news and rumors, starting, of course, with Trey Hendrickson, Katie Blackburn, that kind of exchange that kind of aired itself out publicly. Going to be breaking that down. Also, Field Yates is out with a mock draft. It's the first time he's put out a mock draft with the first and second round. So we've got 2 picks to discuss here for Cincinnati. Going to be breaking those down. As I mentioned, a live mailbag. Get your questions in. Hashtag Bengals or Super Chat. Also, ESPN put out team needs for all 32 teams. We're going to be breaking down the 3 needs that their NFL Nation reporter, Ben Baby, of course, does a tremendous job covering the Bengals, what his top 3 needs were, and a potential prospect that could help with those needs, as well as some trade back rumors. I think some people have been talking about that in regards to the Cincinnati Bengals as well. It's all coming up live here on Bengals Breakdown. Welcome into Bengals Breakdown. I am your host, Stone Shields. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here on a Wednesday evening. Coming up on today's show, we've got a lot to discuss. Trey Hendrickson, of course, went on the Pat McAfee show. He had to discuss some of the things that Katie Blackburn had to say the day previously down in those meetings, those owners' meetings down in Florida. We're going to be breaking down all of those comments here on today's show. Also, The Athletic kind of put out a piece kind of rounding up the offseason for all 32 NFL teams. We've got some quotes from some anonymous NFL execs that have commented on what Cincinnati has done this offseason. We're going to be breaking down those down as well here on today's show. But before we get into that, big shout out to you guys for helping us hit that 18,000 subscriber mark. We were able to do that yesterday on April Fool's Day. Next big milestone for us is going to be 19,000 subscribers. That is the next goal. Big shout out to all of you guys for making 18K happen. Before we know it, we'll be talking about 20K as well on today's, on a future video at Bengals Breakdown. So for all the best Bengals rumors, news, draft talk, you name it, we got it here at Bengals Breakdown. Hit that sub button for me right now, youtube.com/BengalsTV. All right, so Katie Blackburn has made some headlines over the past couple of days for some comments that she has made in regards to Trey Hendrickson. Katie Blackburn, of course, is the executive vice president of the Cincinnati Bengals, and she really oversees everything with this organization now. She is the daughter of Mike Brown, but as Mike Brown has aged, Katie Blackburn has really taken over kind of as the owner of the football team. So let's get into what Katie had to say down at those owners' meetings in Florida. She said, "I wish I knew for sure exactly what would happen. I'd be lying if I said I knew exactly what's going to happen. We'll just have to see how it all plays out." And then this is the part right here that kind of got people a little fired up, right? She goes, "He should be happy at certain rates that maybe he doesn't think he'd be happy at. Some of it is on him to be happy at some point. And if he's not, that's what holds it up sometimes. It takes him to say yes to something. We all have the respect. We have all the respect in the world for him. He's been a great player. We're happy to have him. And so maybe we'll find a way to get something to work. We're just going to have to see where it goes." Thoughts around the corner. But I want to hear from you guys. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot to say in regards to those comments from Katie Blackburn. What is your one-word reaction to her comments? It is the pinned comment of today's video, so if that ad comes through on YouTube, that's totally fine. You could ignore it, take advantage of it, get down in the comment section. Let us know what you think. All right. I don't really have a problem with what she came out and said. To be completely honest with you, she's just kind of stating facts, and she understands that it's probably going to ruffle some feathers. I don't know if she understood necessarily when it came out of her mouth, but looking back, she definitely should understand that it does. But at the end of the day, it is a negotiation, right? This is what happens in the offseason. It's all a part of the NFL. These guys, these players are trying to get mass amounts of money. This money for guys like me and probably most of you guys watching this, really hard to wrap your head around that these guys are going out there playing football and making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. This is big-time money that we are talking about. So the Bengals aren't just going to give that away. It's a two-way street. They got to negotiate, right? The Bengals have dished out a ton of money recently, right? When you talk about Joe Burrow's contract a couple of off seasons ago, and then what they did with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. For an organization like the Cincinnati Bengals, that probably was nauseating, to be completely honest with you, to fork out that much money, despite the fact that they were thrilled to have those three guys here in Cincinnati. They have spent a ton as far as giving big-time contracts to several players over the past couple of seasons. And Hendrickson wants a ton of money. Now, he goes on Pat McAfee, right? And we saw him down at Radio Row at the Super Bowl II, and he acts like, I don't want to say he acts like, because he does seem like a nice guy. He truly does seem like a nice, selfless guy. But at the end of the day, he's looking at his numbers saying, I've had 17.5 sacks both the past 2 seasons. I deserve to be getting a ton of money, and he doesn't feel like he is making the proper money for the production that he has put out there on the football field. And just to be very clear here, I agree with him. He deserves to be making more than what he is based on that production. But again, it's a negotiation. Both sides are going to go back and forth here. Let's take a look at what Trey Hendrickson had to say earlier today on the Pat McAfee show when he went on that program. He said, "Communication has been poor over the last couple of months. That's something I hold in high regard. They have not communicated with my agent directly. It's been something that's been a little bit frustrating. Last year, go out, play the level you have, we'll get it done." It's kind of the message Cincinnati sent to Trey Hendrickson per Trey Hendrickson. That was communicated with me. They also reiterated that at the Combine, so that just kind of clears the air on that. And moving forward, the happiness of my camp. They're more than welcome to call me. I've had the same cell phone number since high school. Open line of communication is always open with me and my agent, so if they have anything they'd like to discuss, we've been nothing but willing to listen. 3 years ago, I began to ask for a long-term contract with guaranteed money. So those deadlines have kind of all just been a blur. I've just been hunting quarterbacks. So at this point, it is what it is. I don't know if I can put a timestamp on it, and that's where to read what I read yesterday was confusing, like it's my decision. I would have been willing to sign 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and this year. It was communicated to me that we would get something done this year. Now, hearing all of this from Trey Hendrickson obviously isn't good news, right? Katie Blackburn went out and said one thing, and then the next day, Trey Hendrickson basically says, well, I haven't heard anything from the Cincinnati Bengals. And, there's multiple reasons to not feel very good about this if you are a fan. Now, I would hope the Bengals wouldn't just go out there and lie, but they have a track record of, treating players not the right way. So it wouldn't surprise me if they haven't been in contact with Trey Hendrickson, despite the fact that Duke Tobin at the Combine said that it was a priority to get Trey Hendrickson done, and that Katie Blackburn was essentially saying that, yeah, we've made offers to him, but they haven't been good enough in the eyes of Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson 100% has the right to be ticked off here, especially when he's looking around at his boys, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. They're getting paid a ton of money, and Trey Hendrickson's going, I've been doing just as good, if not better, not than Jamar Chase, but T. Higgins, you could argue, I'm providing more for you than T. Higgins has from a pass rush perspective, and I'm not getting mine. Now, if you remember, this is also just some built-up frustration. Hendrickson requested a trade going into 2024, and then he requested permission to seek a trade here a couple of weeks ago, right? This has kind of been an ongoing thing, and all he has done since then is balled out. So I completely get the frustration here from Trey Hendrickson. It's going to come down to, he might just have to do it again, to be completely honest with you. He might have to go out there on the football field one more time in 2025 and really go off in order to get that money. That's not fair to Trey Hendrickson, but Cincinnati has to look out for their organization. And if they fork up a ton of money for Trey Hendrickson, they kind of put themselves in an uncomfortable spot. So there's a long way to go with this negotiation between Hendrickson and the Bengals. I don't expect anything to get resolved quickly. The Bengals will make this ugly if they have to, and I don't know, maybe Trey Hendrickson will make it ugly too as well. But at the end of the day, he is under contract, so hopefully something can get worked out where both sides are happy and it's all sunshine and rainbows, but I don't expect that to be coming anytime soon. I want to let you guys know that Bengals draft hats are out now. They are available now. We got those new photos I was talking about. Look at these, man. They've got some cool ones up there on Fanatics. Chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats. We'll put that link in the comment section and the description of today's show. I have not gotten any of these new ones. I'm going to have to put an order in myself because they've got some really cool ones up there on Fanatics. One more time for you guys. That's chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats. All right, second half here of today's show. We're going to talk some NFL executives unfiltered. So as I mentioned, The Athletic dropped a piece where NFL executives basically sounded off on all teams in the NFL, all 32 teams this offseason, and anonymously commented on the Cincinnati Bengals. So we're going to have some quotes that we're going to break down here around the corner, and I'm going to have my thoughts on that as well. But I want to hear from you guys before we get into that. Grade the Cincinnati Bengals so far this offseason. Let me know in the comments section, A, B, C, D, or F. All right, this is what one exec had to say in regards to one Joe Burrow, saying it proves that our league is becoming more like the NBA, top players having more control. And I don't have a problem with this comment, right? Because if it weren't for Joe Burrow, make no mistake, T. Higgins probably would not be still a Cincinnati Bengal, right? I think that got done because Joe Burrow wanted to get done, and he was kind of testing Cincinnati, saying, hey, I really want this to get done. I'm acting like I really want it to get done. Are you guys going to mess this up, or are you going to do what I ask? And ultimately, Cincinnati did what Joe Burrow asked. So I really don't have a problem with that. And there's only a few guys in the league that have this kind of pull. Joe Burrow, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in the National Football League. He certainly deserves a little bit of extra pull, and it was good to see Cincinnati give it to him. Don't have a problem with this comment from this exec. All right, another comment from an NFL executive on the Cincinnati Bengals says they definitely needed to retain Chase, and then Higgins should have been a tag and trade candidate because you need the draft capital and you have to rebuild your defense. You could have made Trey Hendrickson happy with a new deal and have a draft pick if you moved on from Higgins. That was what one exec said. And we got another quote about the receivers essentially from a different anonymous NFL executive saying this: the thought of keeping their quarterback happy is good, but how can you build around him to get him where he needs to go? I'm going to go with fronts and defense over skill, especially when you already have one of the highest paid receivers. To sign another one, T. Higgins, is interesting to me. We're going to see how this pans out, right, when you're talking about T. Higgins coming back and making mass money. I think it was the right call for the Cincinnati Bengals. I said, going back weeks ago, if I had to pick between Trey Hendrickson and T. Higgins, it wouldn't be an easy decision, but I would pick T. Higgins. And I think Cincinnati can win this way with those two star receivers, their star quarterback, Zach Taylor, and they've got a lot of money that's being allocated to the offensive side of the football. I think they're going to be able to win this way. But it is interesting to see these executives from around the league kind of scratch their head a little bit at Cincinnati. It also kind of feels like the Bengals just can't win, right? Because if they wouldn't have paid T. Higgins, everyone would be saying, it's just the Bengals. They're cheap. They don't pay their guys, right? But then they do pay them, and it's like, well, maybe that wasn't the right call. Kind of just feels like there was no way Cincinnati was going to win in the eyes of the public, or I guess in the eyes of some of these NFL executives as well. I think it was the right call that Cincinnati's going out there and paying Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow. Ultimately, we'll find out on the football field if the results prove that it was the right call. Also, another NFL executive pointed out something on Lucas Patrick, who, of course, is the Bengals' newest offensive lineman. I thought this was promising news that we got from The Athletic, saying they got a nice bargain signing with Lucas Patrick. But he just played his best football with Clint Kubiak's system in New Orleans, which is nothing like the pure drop-back game in Cincinnati, where they try to throw the ball all over the yard. Well, they don't try to throw the ball all over the yard. They throw it all over the yard, and we'll see if Lucas Patrick ultimately can come into the Cincinnati Bengals offense and provide some help for them. Could he potentially be a starter? I don't know. I think it's very much a competition. Zach Taylor spoke glowingly about Lucas Patrick. He said he was a guy that the Bengals had their eyes on really before the whole free agency process began, and I'm interested to see if he could perhaps fit in with Cincinnati at that guard spot. Now, it is going to be interesting considering that he comes from New Orleans. I think that executive has a great point. Really not much similarity between what they're doing offensively and what Cincinnati is doing offensively. But if he can hold up in pass pro, which is what the Bengals desperately need him to do, I think they can figure out, how things go from there. But good to have Lucas Patrick, a veteran, in. It's at least somebody that they signed. They at least did something along the interior offensive line. We will see if it pays off. But it's good to hear that an executive around the league said it's kind of a bargain deal for Cincinnati. Make sure you guys give me a follow over on Twitter at StoneShields_ for all the latest Bengals news and rumors, and all of our Bengals content will be posted to my Twitter page. So help us out, help me out. Give me a follow on Twitter at StoneShields_. One word reaction to Katie Blackburn's comments. Let me know in the comments section of today's show. Willie says the O-line is a disaster. Need 2 guards immediately. Burrow stands a good chance of not finishing the year. Ownership is a disaster. What makes anyone think the Bengals will have a good draft? Well, they have drafted fine in the past. Not recently, but there have been years. Think about when they had Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. Great draft. Logan Wilson as well in that draft additionally. But I get not having confidence in them drafting. Needing 2 guards, you got to draft one. I would have liked to sign 2 in free agency. Only did 1 with Lucas Patrick. Zach Taylor basically came out and said, hey, we're not going to bring another one in. I was a big Brandon Scherf guy. He hasn't been signed yet. I don't know if he's going to retire or what kind of the deal is there, but it doesn't seem like Cincinnati has any plans at guard prior to the draft. So definitely a reasonable concern there, Willie, no doubt. But we'll see. Hopefully they can bounce back and have a good year drafting. It's been a while since they've gone out there and really had a nice NFL draft. Tim says draft a guard in the 2nd round. Yeah, I think you got to be careful. I think a lot of us as fans want to sit there and say, this round I want this position, this round I want this position, whatever. You just got to trust that the Bengals are going to know that, okay, if they love this player, they're going to take him, and hopefully it works out to the point where, hey, it's filling a position of need. We'll kind of talk about that on today's show as well. If you take it like Colston Loveland, I see that with a lot of people saying that, Colston Loveland to Cincinnati. Like Tyler Warren is a guy where it's like if he's available at 17, you don't need a tight end, but shoot, Tyler Warren is going to be a star in the NFL. Whereas Colston Loveland, 1, he's just mid. He's not very good. And 2, why would you take a tight end? You got holes all over your defense and your offensive line, and you're going to take a tight end when you just paid Mike Gesicki and then you just extended Tanner Hudson and Cam Grandy and Drew Samples coming off the best year of his career and he's under contract. I just don't understand some of that talk. But regardless, got to draft the player, not the position, which is it's hard because I want to sit there and say, yeah, I agree with you, Tim. I want to say, yep, let's get a guy that can contribute on defense in round 1. Let's look to guard after that. Maybe, if we take a DB in the 1st round, a guard in the 2nd, let's get a pass rusher in the 3rd. That's how I think. But I don't think the Bengals can really afford to think like that here at this point. All right, we're going to be breaking down Field Yates' mock draft here. 2 picks for Cincinnati. Pick in the 1st round and a pick in the 2nd round as well. Tim says the Black Hat's cool. I agree. Some of that stuff there up on Fanatics. Pretty cool stuff, no doubt. All right, let me get organized here. Are you good over there, Chris? All right, Field Yates mock draft coming up right now. Welcome in to Bengals Breakdown. I am your host, Stone Shields, and coming up on today's show, Field Yates of ESPN is out with his first two-round mock draft. So it's got first-round picks for all 32 teams and second-round picks for all 32 teams as well. Obviously, now we are getting into the month of April. It is draft month. Teams are really starting to finalize their boards and figure out which guys they really like and which guys they don't really have interest in drafting. And there are some trades in this, by the way, from Field Yates, which we won't really get too much in depth on here on today's show, but none of the trades impact Cincinnati. They're still picking right where they are, number 17 overall, and same spot in the second round as well. Before we get into this mock draft breakdown, we are running it back here in the month of April. We took a month off in March with this like battle with our Ravens channel. We're going to give it a go again here in the month of April. Last time we did this in February, we came up short. Hoping to get the best of Joey Peterson and those Baltimore Ravens here this month. A little bit behind, but obviously only 2 days in. Regardless, help us out. Hit that thumbs up icon. Something you should do for all of our videos here at Bengals Breakdown. All right, let's kind of get into some of these picks here from Field Yates. Cam Ward goes number 1 overall. Abdul Carter, number 2 to the Cleveland Browns. I feel like every time I see Carter mocked to the Browns, I just kind of go, oh boy, right? Myles Garrett. Abdul Carter coming at a weak Bengals offensive line, and Joe Burrow. That scares me. I don't have a problem admitting that. But Abdul Carter to Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, going off the board, number 3 to the Giants. Travis Hunter, in my opinion, the best player in this draft, 4 to New England. Mason Graham, 5 to Jacksonville. And Ashton Jeanty, 6 to Las Vegas. That's another one I've seen a lot of. And to me, I think Ashton Jeanty is going to be good, but a running back at 6 to me doesn't make too much sense in my opinion. Armand Membu, 7 to the New York Football Jets. Was hoping he would perhaps slide down, but it doesn't seem like Cincinnati's got a shot at landing him at 17 overall. Jalen Walker, popular mock to the Panthers. Shamar Stewart, 9 to the Saints. Will Campbell, 10 to the Chicago Bears. Walter Nolan, bit of a surprise there, 11 to the San Francisco 49ers. Teteroa McMillan, 12 to the Dallas Cowboys. Will Johnson, number 13 to the Miami Dolphins. He's been linked to Cincinnati some. Tyler Warren is going to be a stud, in my opinion. Really no doubt about that. 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. Mike Green, another popular Bengals mock, is off the board here for Field Yates. 15 to the Falcons. And Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, 16 to Arizona. Leads us to the Bengals at number 17. And Field Yates has them taking Gray Zabel, interior offensive lineman, North Dakota State University. It's certainly a need for Cincinnati. Interior offensive line. If they pick an interior offensive lineman at number 17, I'm not going to be up in arms about it. Wasn't something that really was addressed in free agency. Brought in Lucas Patrick, of course. Zach Taylor apparently really likes him. We'll see if he's able to contribute. Don't have a problem with this position necessarily, but Zabel was a guy that I viewed kind of going in the end of the first round. If not, maybe even the beginning of the second round. And Field Yates has Cincinnati taking him at 17. Plenty more on this around the corner, but would you take Gray Zabel at number 17 overall? I want to know what you guys think. If you're Duke Tobin, if you're Zach Taylor, if you're calling the shots here on draft night for Cincinnati, let me know. Type Y for yes or N for no. If that ad comes here on YouTube, that's totally fine. You can ignore it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. Before we go in depth a little bit here on Gray Zabel, I do want to break down who was still available on the board for Field Yates at that number 17 overall selection. Two guys that a lot of us really like. There are those safeties, Malachi Starks and Nick Amanwari, both available there for Cincinnati at 17. Mykel Williams also there, and two guys I really like, Jahad Campbell and Tyler Booker, also available for Cincinnati. That Tyler Booker thing is like, okay, you're taking a guard, but Booker was there and you didn't take him. I do have some question marks about that. Let's take a look at what Field had to say about Gray Zabel. He said, while it is no mystery that the Bengals must attack defense in this draft, there's one notable offensive position that is still a big problem: guard. Consider that 64 guards qualified in pass block win rate last season, and Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa, the Bengals' two starters, were 61st and 64th, respectively. Yikes. Obviously not good. Zabel has had an outstanding pre-draft process. He was the best player I saw at Senior Bowl practices, proving he can dominate against top competition after starting 41 games at the FCS level. Plus, teams believe he has the positional versatility to play guard or center in the NFL, and he is always in control as a pass protector. Now, that kind of sells me a lot there by Field Yates, to be completely honest with you. That's all great stuff. that performance at the Senior Bowl, we heard when we were down there at the Combine, people really liked Zabel there as well, and I guess that's why you're seeing him shoot up some people's draft boards. Now, the level of competition obviously is perhaps a concern, right? We were talking about Zabel. This wasn't a guy that played in the SEC, wasn't a guy that played in the Big Ten. He was out there for North Dakota State playing for those guys, playing for the Bison. And guess what? Cordell Volson also went to North Dakota State. I think Scott Peters, your new offensive line coach, is kind of hoping to come in and save Cordell Volson a little bit. Do you get him somebody that also went to the same university in Zabel to perhaps work together? I don't know. It could be something that is interesting for the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a kid that's a really, really tough kid. That's obviously what you need in the offensive line, and he has been able to stay out on the football field a lot as well. I'm looking for health. I don't like drafting offensive linemen that have an injury history. That might not be fair to some of those guys, but that's just kind of how I think they're when you're talking about taking an offensive lineman early in the draft. Field Yates kind of sold me on this, to be completely honest with you. I still like Tyler Booker out of Alabama. He's got some of that big game experience, but I don't have an issue taking an interior offensive lineman in the first round, but you better address the defense pretty much every round after that. We'll continue with our show here in a minute, but first, a shout-out to our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Springtime is here and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks lineup, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash today. They also had the flex play here at PrizePicks, and this is what we're rolling with as far as our season-long flex play goes for football, which obviously is several months away, but regardless, you can get those in, get them ready to go. Going with the less than on Jared Goff passing yards, as well as the less than on Travis Kelce receiving yards. Additionally, the less than on Jaden Daniels rushing yards as well. The beautiful thing about the flex play, you don't have to get all 3 of those correct. You can miss one and still have an opportunity to double your money. PrizePicks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. So download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right. As I mentioned, Field Yates has a second-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals as well. Let's figure out, we're not going to go through the whole second round, but we're going to do these last 6 picks here. Ariante Ursery, guy that we've spent a lot of time talking about, offensive lineman out of Minnesota. Field has him going to the Niners. Trey Hendrickson, running back out of Ohio State, to the Dallas Cowboys. Carson Swishinger, I always say the name wrong, apologies there, linebacker out of UCLA, to the Colts. Darius Alexander, a guy that I like a lot, out of Toledo, interior defensive lineman. Nick Scorton, edge rusher, 47, to the Cardinals. Jonah Savaiinaea, offensive lineman out of Arizona as well, going to Miami. Cincinnati will pick at number 49 overall in the second round. I guess that's the 18th pick of the second round. There's a comp pick there that makes it so they're not picking at that 17 spot. But regardless, Azariah. I had to practice that one. Azariah Thomas out of Florida State, the cornerback there, and he is brothers with Wanye Thomas, who, of course, plays for the Dallas Cowboys. The Bengals could certainly improve at corner, and there's a lot of youth here in that room, so I do have some questions about adding another guy like Thomas to that room, but that is who Field has them taking in the second round. Would you draft Azariah Thomas in round 2? Let me know in the comments of today's show. Type A for yes or B for no down in the comments. Let us know what you think. All right, some other guys that were on the board before Cincinnati selected Thomas here in this mock from Field Yates. Shavon Ravel Jr. was still there, corner. I think some people believe that he's a step above Thomas as far as his abilities out there on the football field. Xavier Watts, of course, is a popular pick. Of course, played for Al Golden at Notre Dame. A lot of people want him to kind of reunite with Al Golden there at the professional level. Landon Jackson, edge guy. JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. Those are probably the 2 best edge guys on the board in the second round. And then you also have Alfred Collins out of Texas at the interior defensive line, defensive tackle. Let's take a look here at what Field had to say about Azariah Thomas, saying, After we address their offensive line in round 1, the Bengals could now get to work on the defense. Thomas would bring excellent 6'2" size and ball skills to their cornerback room, though he lacks superb top-end speed. Scouts I spoke with had him in the high 4.5s and the 40 at his pro day. That definitely is kind of the biggest concern when you're talking about Thomas, is that speed. Not necessarily top-of-the-line speed, but he's got great size. He's a really physical player, and as I mentioned, his brother's in the NFL. He has those ties to guys that are in the NFL. Again, I think the Bengals really could use another corner, but I was hoping that they were going to address it during free agency. I thought bringing in a veteran guy would have been more beneficial to Al Golden and this defense as opposed to drafting another guy, because you have a ton of youth in your quarterback room right now, and I don't think necessarily it has developed the way that you were hoping to. Now, your coaches there in the secondary are still the same. You got kind of a revamp there with your coaching staff defensively. Those secondary guys are still in place. Need to see more development from DJ Turner. He was really coming on strong, and then he got hurt. Dax Hill, I'm a big fan of him. He was going to break out, and then he got hurt as well. So those two are kind of unfortunate. Cam Taylor-Britt certainly regressed this past year. Hopefully he can get back on the right track. I think he's definitely going to be a starter for you at this point. Marco Wilson is back on a short-term deal as well. Also, Josh Newton, who showed some promise, your fifth-round pick out of TCU last year. All those guys need to improve. I think they could have used a veteran guy, especially with Mike Hilton probably not being back. But Field has them taking another young corner in this year's draft. To round up here, what Field Yates had in these 2 rounds. Gray Zabel, round 1, pick 17 overall. Interesting selection. I don't have an issue with that, to be honest with you. And then second round, Azariah Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State, round 2, pick 49. Don't love that one. Don't like taking a corner that high. Again, would have rather them just got one in free agency and kind of build around the youth that they already have in that room. But really don't have a ton of issues with this selection. And the Zabel one intrigues me in the first round. Make sure you guys hit that sub button if you haven't done so already for all the latest Bengals draft rumors we got you covered, and news, of course, here on the channel, youtube.com/BengalsTV. Mailbag time here on Bengals Breakdown. Get your questions in. Hashtag Bengals or Super Chat. Skip the line altogether. Get them in there. Get your questions in. How are we looking on questions here, Kristaps? We're in a good spot. But make sure you guys continue to get your questions in. Hashtag Bengals or Super Chat. Skip the line altogether. Tim says you can get a guard in the second or third round. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you don't want to take one in the first round, I get it. You can, if you draft well, which, draft and develop well, you can find starting guards anywhere in the draft. But we'll see if ultimately Cincinnati is able to make that happen. All right. Get your questions in, hashtag Bengals, and we will get started here with our mailbag. Before we get in today's mailbag, make sure you guys share today's video for me on social media if you haven't done so already. Any platform in which you desire, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, it works for us. We're really just trying to get the word out there to more Bengals fans that aren't necessarily tapped into what we're doing here at Bengals Breakdown. So help us out. Share today's video for me right now. First question from my guy, Tim Tyra. Do you think Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals, will get an extension done, or will the Bengals let him finish out this upcoming season and tag him 2 times? Play or retire? Good question here from Tim Tyra. It is still my belief that Cincinnati is going to get something done with Trey Hendrickson, but they also are going to have to kind of meet in the middle here, because Trey Hendrickson loves coming on and, playing this kind of good guy role, which I'm not saying he's not a good guy. He seems to say and do all the right things. I'm not going after him at all, but at some point he's got to understand what Cincinnati is doing, who they are paying, what they are trying to do as an organization. He might have to take a little bit less. I don't know if ultimately he is going to do that, but Duke Tobin said at the Combine it was a priority. Katie Blackburn, despite some of her comments that some people have kind of gotten a little up in arms about, maybe they were a little snarky to some degree. I think that's kind of fair to say that with Katie Blackburn's comments. But Duke Tobin, He went out there and said those things about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He turned around and made it happen. We'll see if he can do that with Trey Hendrickson. At this point, I don't have any reason not to believe him. I don't think it'll be anytime soon, and it could perhaps get a little bit ugly. But right now, if I had to pick, I would say ultimately Trey Hendrickson is able to reach a new deal with Cincinnati before week 1 of next year. CWT, are you happy with what Zach Taylor said at the coaches' meeting? Yeah, I would say so. Really, the only thing that I was disappointed by was kind of their plan at guard / lack thereof, because it didn't seem like there was much of a plan. I think at this point here, I mean, I get it, right? Free agency for the most part has kind of came and went, or there's some guys that are still available, sure, but I think their approach there at that guard spot, it was really the only thing that was a little frustrating for me. They're going to have to get one in the draft, and Scott Peters and Zach Taylor are going to have to do a great job developing them to make sure that they are in a good season or in a good spot to go out there and execute at a professional level for him this season. But I really liked what Taylor had to say about the preseason. I think that kind of was the number one thing for me. They got to play more in the preseason. Obviously, there is the concern with injuries, but you can't continue to start out the way you have in September. This isn't just a one-year thing. This has been a reoccurring theme since Zach Taylor got here in 2019. Something has to change, and I think the number one most obvious thing you could change is playing those guys a little bit more in the preseason. An opportunity for you guys to get involved here with our show. Do you want the starters to play more in the preseason? Let me know in the comment section. Type Y for yes or N for no. If that ad comes here on YouTube, that is totally fine. You can ignore it, take advantage of it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. Who Dey, number 9. Bengals thoughts on Jonah Savaiinaea. I mocked him in our second mock draft. We will have another one that comes out eventually. We have 2 mock drafts out right now. Make sure you guys check those out on the channel. Our second one, I had the Bengals taking him in the second round, and PFF said that was like a D selection for me. It may have even been an F. I like Savaiinaea a lot. I think you're kind of in an awkward spot there. I'm not quite sure he's a second-round guy, but I liked what we saw from him in Arizona. I think he's going to do great in an offense that likes to drop back and chuck the football around the field like Cincinnati does. Got some run-blocking concerns with Savaiinaea. Some people would say it's an overdraft to take him there in the second round. I think the Bengals might just be in an awkward spot to land him. But if he's available and you're thinking offensive line and it isn't too early in the draft, I definitely think he would be a good selection, hence why I mocked him to Cincinnati in one of my mock drafts. Tim Tyra, will the Bengals draft 1 or 2 guards in the draft? Interesting question. I was thinking that they would sign 2 free agent guards, and obviously they only did 1 with Lucas Patrick. So as of now, Cincinnati only has 6 picks, and they've got lots of needs on their football team. I would say 1 probably. Maybe they take, a tackle that hopefully can play guard, perhaps. It's when you're dealing with offensive linemen here in the draft, I think a lot of times you find yourselves in situations like that where it's like, okay, this guy was a great tackle in college, but he's going to have to move to the inside if he's going to be productive in the National Football League. But offensive linemen, if you're making me pick, I would like this answer to be 2, but I would say Bengals probably will take 1 here. Maybe they get their 7th-round pick back somehow and are able to get another one, but I'll go with 1 here right now. Make sure you guys go over to Fanatics and check out their draft hats over on Fanatics. Really cool stuff over there. We've got some new pictures here loaded in to our graphics here. Really encourage you guys to go over to Fanatics. Check some of these out. I have not been able to get any of these new ones, but boy, they've got some really clean ones over on Fanatics. These are some of the best ones that I have seen up there on Fanatics, chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats. We're going to put that link in the comment section and the description of today's video for you guys. One more time, that is chatsports.com/Bengals draft hats. Caleb Norman, who is your dream first-round pick? Good question here from Caleb. Dream first-round pick? Travis Hunter, but I'll go realistic. Dream first-round pick here for the Cincinnati Bengals, and I will say Jalen Walker. We're actually doing a little mock draft at Chat Sports across all of our hosts here, and we're all picking players for each of the teams, and he was available to me in this Chat Sports one at 17, and I took him, and I didn't think twice about it. I would be shocked if when a couple weeks roll around, if he's available actually for Cincinnati at that 17 overall position. But Jalen Walker to me is a guy that can wear multiple different hats for you on defense. He can drop back there with Logan Wilson at that linebacker position. He can also get after the quarterback there as well. I think that versatility is something that really you desperately seek because you've got so many holes on your defense. I would think he would fit in really well with what Al Golden is trying to accomplish his first year as the Bengals defensive coordinator. So I would go with Jalen Walker as my dream pick out of Georgia. Felicia, will Lucas Patrick start? Good question here from Felicia. I don't know. I think, the Bengals are bringing him in to kind of get into that competition, right? This definitely isn't a situation where, we signed Lucas Patrick, you pencil him in there next to Ted Karras along the offensive line as a starter. No, I don't think that is the case. He is going to compete with Cody Ford, Cordell Volson, and whoever the Bengals draft. So 4 or 5 guys are going to be competing for that spot. Another name we haven't really talked about is Matt Lee, who 7th-round pick out of Miami last year is Ted Karras' backup at center. I don't know if the Bengals think he can play guard or not. I really like him as a center, but I'm not quite sure if he can play guard for Cincinnati. We will see. But Lucas Patrick, Zach Taylor seemingly loves him. He was glowing about him at some of those meetings down in Florida when he was talking about him. So hopefully that pans out. Hopefully Scott Peters can make the most of it as well. We talk about that hire. Zach Taylor hiring Scott Peters, arguably the biggest decision he has made of his career. We will see if it pans out, but I don't know if Lucas Patrick is going to start. He's definitely going to compete for a starting spot. Bye, Felicia. All right, let's talk whole confidence level here in the Bengals offensive line. Scale it for me in the comments section. 1 on the low end, 10 on the high end. Get down there and scale it. Confidence level in the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. Dr. B, James Rapine, says that we should draft best player available no matter offense or defense. Do you agree? I would say to an extent. I would say yes. If it's tight end, no, unless it's Tyler Warren. So basically not Colston Loveland is basically what I would say to that. You've got a lot of holes. Really, anybody on defense, you shouldn't be mad. You shouldn't. If there's a defensive player you don't like that the Bengals draft, yeah, you could be mad about that. But there's no reason to say, I like this guy, but that's not the position that I would want to draft there. I think that's what Rapine's trying to hammer home. You don't want to necessarily draft position. You want to draft the player. Like Jahad Campbell, if he's sitting there at 17 and you've got some guys off your board that you fell in love with that are no longer available, don't not take Jahad Campbell just because he's a linebacker and you feel okay what you have at linebacker, even though linebacker definitely is a need. But what I'm trying to say is don't draft the position. Got to draft the player, which can be hard for us as fans, right? Because I'm kind of sitting there like, go get an edge rusher, right? Well, you might not love an edge rusher, and you might love a linebacker or a corner or a safety or an offensive lineman. So it kind of goes with that. But yeah, I don't think necessarily, like if Tet McMillan is there at 17, no, you don't draft Tet McMillan. Your receivers are good. You've got the best receivers in the National Football League. Do not take a receiver at 17 overall. Same with a guy like I just mentioned, Colston Loveland. A running back in the first round wouldn't make any sense either. But beyond those 3 positions, quarterback obviously, behind those 4, I would say best player available for sure. Caleb Norman, this entire franchise is like a bad breakup. Yeah, I get your frustration, no doubt about it. They definitely seemingly make things hard. My biggest gripe is that when people come out, like Katie Blackburn says one thing, right? And then Trey Hendrickson comes out and basically says, no, that's not true. I haven't even heard from them. I got a problem with that, all right? Either somebody stop lying or let's get on the same page here. But regardless, yeah, it does seem like a lot of drama with this organization. I was telling Chris earlier, when you look at their front office, it's just a handful of people. Like, they got like 3 scouts, then you got Tobin and Blackburn, right? And it's kind of a family business thing. And then Zach Taylor's in there as well. Shoot, Joe Burrow's probably at the top somewhere, right? Seemingly he's like an assistant GM. But regardless, there's lots of frustrating elements of this organization. But they do deserve a lot of credit for getting those deals done with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and, of course, Joe Burrow a couple of years ago. If you are enjoying this mailbag, we appreciate you. And you're in luck because we are going to keep doing these for you guys. Hit that sub button so you don't miss out. YouTube.com/BengalsTV. From Mike, what are the chances we trade down in the draft and acquire more picks? This is definitely something that could happen, very much so. Look, Cincinnati's not going to trade up in the draft. That's not something they would do. But trade back for more picks, I totally could see it. They're kind of at an awkward spot. At 17 overall, right? It's not like you have a top 10 pick. You're not going to get a great player. You can still get a good player at 17. But if you move back to like 22, and then add a couple of picks, maybe a third rounder, a fifth rounder, yeah, that's something that I would do personally. You only have 6 picks. You got a lot of holes. I would like to stock up on those picks a little bit. I think trading back would definitely be a good possibility for Cincinnati. It's just whether or not they are able to do that. Are they competent enough to be able to do that? Sit there, they're on the clock. Okay, all of our guys that we love are off the board. Let's make a trade. Are they able to do that? I don't know, but I definitely think it's something that they should consider. Grade the Bengals so far this offseason. Let me know in the comments section. A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know what you guys think. Sound off for us. And around the corner here, our final segment of today's show. We're going to be talking some team needs. Looking forward to breaking those down. Keep the comments coming. Take a sip of water here, and we'll get ready to go for our final segment. All right, some ESPN needs that we will get to here. And we're also going to talk more about trading back as well. So I know you guys were talking about that on our mailbag. So we are going to break that down on today's show as well. What is the Bengals' biggest position of need? I know there's several of them, certainly a lot throughout the defense and obviously the offensive line as well. But do me a favor, get in the comment section. Pick one for me right now. What is the Bengals' biggest position of need? Welcome into Bengals Breakdown. I am your host, Stone Shields, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be breaking down some team needs for Cincinnati. So basically, ESPN got together with all their NFL Nation reporters, and they all identified the 3 biggest positional needs for each team. Of course, the ESPN NFL Nation reporter for the Cincinnati Bengals is Ben Baby. He does a fantastic job covering the Cincinnati Bengals. Draft analysts named prospects for the needs. So Baby lists 3 top needs, and then their guys, Matt Miller and another guy as well, basically picked a prospect that was not projected to go in the first round. So somebody that was projected to go in a later round that could perhaps fit that need for each team. Here's what Ben Baby had to say for his top needs for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got defensive end, linebacker, and safety, all of which certainly massive needs for the Cincinnati Bengals. Is that their top 3? I think you could kind of go back and forth on that, right? I think a lot of people probably would have interior offensive line on there as well, but there is no denying that the Bengals need to get better at these 3 spots. Let's take a look here at what Ben Baby had to say in his article on ESPN. He said Cincinnati is still looking for a long-term edge rusher who can take over when Trey Hendrickson's prolific run comes to an end. Joseph Osai showed some flashes last season, but the Bengals could still use another dominant pass rusher. Elsewhere on the defense, a linebacker who could start in a year or 2 would be helpful. The Bengals have not seriously addressed that position in the draft since 2020. As for the secondary, landing a free safety to play behind Geno Stone, but who has a future starter potential, is also important. Overall, well said there from Ben Baby. Let's take a look at those 3 groups here. Defensive end, of course, you got Trey Hendrickson. The ongoing dispute between Katie Blackburn, Bengals organization, and Trey Hendrickson certainly at play, but I do expect him to be back for 2025. Joseph Osai, I've been very candid about Osai. I would have let him walk, but you get him on a prove-it year, just a 1-year deal. We will see if he can get some of that talent that he showed at Texas and really bring it to the table for this football team in 2025. Behind that, I like Cam Sample, but he's coming off the Achilles, of course. Miles Murphy, you took first rounder a couple of years ago. That is blown up in your face. Cedric Johnson, your 6th-round pick out of Ole Miss last year, I have a lot of high hopes for, though, as well. Linebacker-wise, Jermaine Pratt, of course, requested a trade early in the offseason. Still have him here on the step chart because, as of now, he's still a member of the football team. But I would be surprised if he was back in 2025. You got Oren Burke, Super Bowl champion with the Philadelphia Eagles in there as well. but I don't view him as a starter. I view him as a guy that's kind of taking over that third linebacker role when Akeem Davis-Gaither left to be a starter. With Arizona, you got Shaq Hayward, Mumajong Maeda, and Craig Young also in that room right now. Safety-wise, also been very vocal about, hey, I would let go of Geno Stone, right? Jordan Battle kind of concerned you with his play there at the beginning of the year, but he finally finished strong. Geno Stone also, by the way, got to give him some credit. He finished strong as well. Behind that, Dejon Anthony, Jalen Key, Tyson Anderson, who's a special teams ace, but can he go out there and play safety for you? I don't know. P.J. Jules as well. Lots of questions there at that safety spot. No doubt Cincinnati needs to draft one in the draft. Now, do you agree with Ben Baby's top needs? Let me know in the comment section. Type Y for yes or N for no. It is the pinned comment of today's show. So if that ad comes here on YouTube, that is totally fine. You can ignore it. Take advantage of it. Get down in the comments. Let us know what you think. All right, so I told you that ESPN Matt Miller was going to come up with a top prospect that fit those needs for Ben Baby. And the first one that he came up with, the only one that they came up with, was James Pearce Jr., which is kind of interesting because, again, a stipulation here was that it was somebody that wasn't a first-round prospect, projected to go in the first round. Now, some people have James Pearce Jr. going in the first round, but apparently ESPN does not, and this certainly fills a massive hole when you're talking about James Pearce Jr. perhaps coming to your football team in the second round. Here's what Matt Miller had to say about James Pearce Jr. He said, Pearce is the speedy pass rusher the Bengals need opposite Hendrickson, or could serve as the backup plan should Hendrickson sit out the 2025 season following a trade request. Look, James Pearce Jr. in the second round would be awesome. I remember sitting here as the season was kind of winding down and kind of getting into our draft talk for the very first time, and we were sitting here talking about James Pearce Jr. at number 17 overall, and I still think there's some teams out there that would consider taking James Pearce Jr. in the first round. So if you can get him in the second round, heck yeah, sign me up. I do have my questions on whether or not he falls that far. As I mentioned, there are some people out there that are still mocking him to go in the first round, kind of the late end of that first round, because there is a lot of potential, and a lot of people sometimes, organizations will draft on what they believe someone's ceiling could be. I think James Pearce Jr. could definitely have a very high ceiling, but the question, of course, is what the floor is going to look like. Look, you have to draft an edge rusher, and I wanted to have this conversation here because getting involved with the comments, some of you guys seem to think that, oh, no, we can just kind of roll back with what we've got there at that edge spot. And look, I got to be honest with you, that's completely outlandish, right? You might love Joseph Osai, that's fine, but if your plan is Joseph Osai is going to be your next guy there with Myles Murphy and Trey Hendrickson, no, that's not good enough. That's not even close, to be completely honest with you. We have tried that over the past couple of years, and it has not worked at all. It's been Trey Hendrickson or nothing from a pass rush perspective. That has to get cleaned up. They will take an edge rusher at some point in this draft. Maybe it's not the first round, maybe it's not the second round, but they will get a new body to add to that room. Absolutely no doubt about that. I thought that was obvious. I think most of you guys probably agree with me, but I know there's a few people out there that are seemingly okay with what the Bengals have at that edge spot. We'll continue with our show here in a minute, but first, I want to give a shout-out to our friends over at PrizePicks, because today's show is made possible by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Springtime is here and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your PrizePicks lineup. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash today. PrizePicks also has the Flex Play. It's what we're rolling with as far as our season-long Flex Play goes for football season, which obviously is a long way away, but you can still get these PrizePicks in. Go with the less than on Jared Goff passing yards, the less than on Travis Kelce receiving yards, as well as the less than on Jaden Daniels rushing yards as well. The beautiful thing about the Flex Play, you don't have to get all three of those correct. You can actually miss one of them and still have an opportunity to double your money. PrizePicks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits in your account this sports season. So download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, second half of today's show here. Bill Barnwell of ESPN came up with first-round trades for all 32 teams in the National Football League. And he did sit there and say, hey, like, this obviously isn't going to happen. This is very much a far-fetched thing. Each team making a trade, obviously not going to happen here in the first round, but he did have Cincinnati trading back, and I thought it was a good proposition. This is what Barnwell's trade idea was. He says Cincinnati gives up pick number 17 in the first round to the Houston Texans, but still keeps a first-round pick, 25 overall, and then they're going to get a third-round pick, number 79, from the Houston Texans, and a fifth-round pick, number 166, from the Houston Texans, so they add 2 additional picks. Should the Bengals consider trading back in the first round? Let me know in the comments. Type A for yes or B for no. I think this is totally a yes for me. I've been saying this for a while. I don't think it would be a bad thing. You're kind of at that spot, right? You're kind of at an awkward spot, as we'll kind of get to later on in today's show. It's not like you got a top 10 pick. But let me know. Should the Bengals consider trading back in the first round? Type A for yes or B for no. Here's what Barnwell had to write for ESPN. He says, the Bengals have whiffed on several defensive draft picks as Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins have gotten expensive, which means they don't have many options besides trying again. Getting as many day 1 and day 2 picks as possible on defense would give them the best shot at finding cheap contributors. At their current first rounder might come a little too late, as the Falcons and Cardinals are also desperate for pass rushers ahead of them. Maybe they should take an edge rusher on day 2 and focus on defensive tackle or secondary help here. Look, I am not opposed to trading back, as I've said several times here on this show. Again, you only have 6 picks right now, and you have a ton of holes, despite the fact that you got several superstars on your football team, and T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow. I question if the Bengals are capable in terms of making this happen, right? They would trade back. They definitely wouldn't trade up, right? That's not something they would do. But they've traded back in the past, and I could see them doing it again. But you also have to understand it's a situation where you're on the clock, you're looking at your board, all of our guys that we love, okay, they're gone. Okay, we got to get out of here. We got to get on the phones with another team. We got to send these picks back. We got to understand what we're getting, and you don't have a ton of time in order to make that happen. So I question if Cincinnati is capable of doing that because, it's the Bengals, of course, after all. 17 is just an awkward spot to pick, in my opinion, right? It's not a top 10 pick, but at the same time, it's not the last pick, right? You didn't win the Super Bowl, you're not picking last. So there's some good guys that are going to be there, but this draft isn't a loaded draft. Sure, there's some positions that, people really like in this draft, but I would consider this one of the weaker drafts in recent years. You're not probably going to get a superstar can't-miss guy at 17. There's going to be some risk with whoever you would take at that 17 spot. I hope they address their needs. Right, as we've talked about a lot here on the show, you can't just draft the position. You got to draft the player, right? Because if you draft the position, that's where things can get a little hairy on you. You got to fall in love with the player and ultimately take them. I just hope they go after their needs and understand that, hey, bringing in a tight end early is not going to do any good for you, right? You brought back Mike Gesicki. You re-signed Tanner Hudson, Cam Grandy, Drew Samples coming off the best year of his career. He's still under contract, right? Your tight end room, despite the fact Derek Hall Jr. is going to miss all of 2025, your tight end room is in good hands, right? Running back, yeah, it's a loaded running back draft. Cincinnati probably will take a running back, but don't mess around and take one in the first 2 rounds, right? You got your running back, your franchise running back in Chase Brown. He's unbelievable. Obviously, don't think about taking a quarterback. But besides that, you really got needs all over the place, and there's a lot of guys that could help fill those needs. I just hope that's what Cincinnati does, and I would say I have confidence that they're going to at least attempt to make that happen. Make sure you guys hit that sub button if you haven't done so already. It's youtube.com/Bengals TV. We are here all off season long. Do not miss any of our coverage. Hit that sub button right now. Do you want the starters to play more in the preseason? Let me know in the comments of today's show. Type Y for yes or N for no. Let me know in the comments. I'm happy about it, personally. We will be live again next Wednesday. Do not miss out on our live show. Hopefully we will be live on all Wednesdays here in the near future, so don't miss out. We'll have plenty of action here on Bengals Breakdown. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I certainly did as well. So don't miss any of our future live shows. Hit that subscribe button for me, youtube.com/Bengals TV.